Welcome to the channel. I want to talk to you today about the speech of JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States at the Munich Security Conference. He said some very interesting stuff, some very interesting things. He stepped up for the European nations. He defended us against our own leaders, if you can imagine. He's speaking the normal language of humans, not the language of politicians, where you just hear some random words woven together that don't make any sense at the end of the day, or they just say obvious things which everybody knows. He touched upon some very important topics: the security in Europe, cancelled elections in Romania, future plans and cooperation between Europe and the United States. So let's listen to what he has to say.
We gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to...
So he says there, we hope that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine. And I think this is the only time he mentions the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine.
Step up in a big way to provide for its own defense. The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of...
So he doesn't fear Russia, China regarding European safety, but he fears the threat from within. I think what he means is the threat of our own policies and of our own politicians in the European Union.
Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election.
He's talking about a French European commissioner who was interviewed and who said, so we canceled the election in Romania, and if something happens also in Germany or in any other country, we will just have to do the same and just cancel the election.
He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years,
they are shocking also to European citizens.
We've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team.
So he's basically saying, we, the Americans, we think we are on the same team. And we have been hearing for years that together we are defending democratic principles. But he's also saying what is now happening in Europe has nothing to do with democracy.
We must do more than talk about democratic values, we must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And
So he's comparing what's happening now in Europe with the Russian Soviet regime, which has done the same things that democracies have been saying for years, look what they are doing. They are canceling elections. They are doing this and that. And that's exactly what is happening in our democracy in Europe right now.
God, they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected.
So he's basically saying they are forcing us what to think, what to believe, what to vote. And I'm sure a lot of you think the same way.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision.
Silent prayer is criminalized. Whatever.
Within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government...
People, stop praying. You're breaking the law.
...urged readers to report any fellow citizen suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe...
Thought crime? What the heck is thought crime?
Free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here...
I'm curious how many other things we are going to find out about the coronavirus
today, not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now,
so flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its neighbors, continental neighbors. So that's why they canceled the elections in Romania. If he doesn't know, the Vice President of America, what he's talking about, then I don't know who does. So indeed, it was just a flimsy suspicion. There was no interference. It's crazy, really crazy.
As I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I mean, how can a social media campaign a few days before the election, because they said in Romania that only in the last few days they saw an increase in TikTok accounts that did commercials for one candidate or another, and that's why he won 2.5 million votes. Like, come on. And when they studied the TikTok data, they saw that another candidate in the same election had actually more views than this one, which they accused of Russian interference. So it's bullshit, 100%. Democracy means that people are allowed to choose whatever they want. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. It doesn't matter. Democracy is democracy, right? And you are allowed to choose what you want, and the voice of the majority has to be heard, right? So the more votes, the one who has the more votes wins. You cannot come and just annul an election because it doesn't agree with you, because the other guy won. Like, then let's just give all the power to these bureaucrats now in Europe and just step aside and let them take over the world, because let's not hold any elections anymore if they will just annul them, right?
Now, the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference...
He's basically saying the European politicians let the citizens speak their mind. Incredible. And now he's going to talk, I think, about politicians not being invited to the Munich security thing, what they are doing there.
Have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when people represent, when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us...
And that's the foundation of democracy, like, right, dialogue. Even if you say your opinion, I say my opinion, and that's democracy. You cannot just shut everybody up.
On the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests, hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea.
So old interests hiding behind Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation. And he's exactly right. I mean, that resonates with how the European citizens are feeling right now. Right? I mean, you are not allowed to speak your mind. There are laws against that. In Romania, it's happening after the election. A lot of people who posted on social media woke up with the police in their home, and they were taken to the police station and questioned and asked why did they post their opinion on social media. I mean, it's crazy, right? But it's happening.
That somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to...
That's crazy. So he's just telling the European politicians, you have to leave the people to choose what they want. He's begging for them to let Europe to be democratic, because the Americans and everybody is seeing that what's happening now in Europe, it's not democracy.
Increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces...
He's accusing the European politicians of being afraid of their own people. Like, this is amazing. And I think it's true, actually.
There's many challenges. But the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the...
He's accusing European politicians of not being democratic. It's crazy. It's incredible. But he's actually right. Like, look at what happened in Romania. They annulled the election. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. There's a war, but they are not holding any democratic elections. Maybe the people have other views now. They want to change. They want to go a different way. How do we know that the will of the people is being respected in Ukraine? For example, I mean, maybe the people want to end the war, but there's a martial law and they're not holding any free elections. So, but in Romania, it's also crazy to cancel the election because of what? There is no proof. They didn't give us any proof.
Coming years, have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern. because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail. Whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own...
That's the defense ministry in Germany, Pistorius, or what's his name. He's not pleased. But I think everything that Vance is talking about here, I think he's right. And I know a lot of you guys watching, a lot of Europeans feel exactly the same way. They are really lying to us right about now about democracy, about their purpose, about what they are going to do in the future. Nobody trusts the European politicians anymore.
Or a journalist trying to report the news. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics.
JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States, has to explain to our own politicians that the voters in Europe, the citizens of Europe, are smart. He's trying to convince them of this. So this is amazing, like incredible, how low the European politicians are, how weak they are, how unprofessional they are. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. And it's hardly surprising.
No, but that's how they see us, right? They see us like educated animals or interchangeable cogs in the economy. They just see us as, yeah, one worker, two workers, three workers, and that's it. Amazing.
That they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects
that guy is sleeping there.
Nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy.
So he's basically saying, European politicians, with your policies, you are destroying your economy, your democracy and economy. They're doing both. We will talk about that. So it's like, he's so right.
And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk.
I think comparing Elon Musk to Greta Thunberg, it's, yeah, Elon is not happy about that because they're at another level, right?
But what German democracy, what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered.
So what I understand from this, he's coming to us from the US and he's telling the politicians in Europe, do not be undemocratic. He's like, it's a warning right before the German elections, because I think the US knows that something might happen, that something might be annulled, like they did in Romania. Like, that's incredible, what's happening now in Europe. If the Americans have to come to warn us or to tell them, we are seeing what you're doing, don't do it, right? He's basically saying that we are seeing, we are aware of what you're doing, you should stop. That's what I understand from this.
Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters.
This guy is the president of Bavaria, Markus Söder.
There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising. How
I understand this, he's saying, so do not be afraid if they're going to vote for somebody else. This is how democracy works. Stop grabbing on to power. Let the people choose whatever they want. That's how democracy works. It's incredible that he has to teach democracy to our politicians. Incredible.
Even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights...
He's actually fighting for the cause of European citizens. So really, this is, I think, a true politician. When you hear somebody talking so normal, not using some big words that mean nothing, like our politicians tend to do every day, just saying basically basic stuff, but using big words to sound smart, and not having any substance to their message. I mean, my God, and I cannot imagine what would have happened if Kamala Harris would have won.
Will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership.
So he basically believes that the European politicians are afraid of us, of the European citizens. That's why they are not letting us be free or vote democratically. If this guy doesn't know what he's talking about as the Vice President of the United States, then who the heck does?
Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
So this is incredible. That the Vice President of America has to come to Europe to defend European citizens and to tell the European politicians, what you are doing is not democratic, stop it, you should not be doing this. So, I don't know, guys, this is incredible. What do you believe? Leave a comment or a like or subscribe if you want, but I mean, this is incredible what is happening. So have a good evening and thank you for watching. Bye.